Okay. Are we ready to make a painting? Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my studio. My name's Michael Markowsky. Today we're going to recreate another painting by another one of my favorite artists. Today is our second of 2 days where we're focusing on the work of the great... come on, Michael, get it together. Oh, here we are. Of the great Sonia Delaunay. And again, on the previous episode, we talked a lot about her and what makes her so special, particularly the work that she's most known for, which is her abstract paintings. But today we're actually going to rewind the clock back just a few years before she had that breakthrough, and look at some of the earlier work that she did that was more figurative, more landscape-based, and just sort of showing that there's a way that, you know, the patterns that she created that were used in her paintings, as well as the clothing, furniture, interior design, set design, costumes, and all those other things that she did, and the murals that she did. She also applied that same approach to her portraits and to her landscapes as well. In fact, one might say she perfected her whole approach to color through the portraits that she had painted. And this is one of my favorite paintings. It's not really one of her most well-known ones. There are a few others that I really, really like, including this one here. I think this is probably more well-known, probably the most well-known, arguably, of this period of her work. But I also I'm just more attracted to this one. I just love the pink colors in here. The contrast, I think, is just an absolutely gorgeous masterpiece of art. So I'm super excited to paint this. Now, as I mentioned, there is another painting here, and I'll show you. There is where you could, if you wanted to do that painting, you also have that option. So maybe before we even go too much further, I just want to kind of lay out the process of how we're going to cover today's painting. Those of you that have been painting with me for years, you know the whole routine. It's the same thing over the past 189 paintings. 189 paintings. We're approaching 200 paintings. That's crazy. I would never have thought we would have gotten this far when I began a couple of years ago. But anyway, this is the outline. This is the plan of attack. We're going to transfer the image onto the canvas. We're going to paint a little bit of color on it, and then we're going to talk about the biography of Sonia Delaunay, kind of a part two, just going to expand a little bit upon what we might have kind of skipped over last time. And then we're going to break down the painting into a few different stages, right? What I call like passes. We're going to pass one, over the foreground and background, etc. But we'll explain that. And at the very end, we'll do a side-by-side comparison. And if you're watching this video for the very first time, you can just use the chapter markings down below, skip right to the end and go, that looks good, I'm going to do that. Or, ooh, no good, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Hopefully a little bit more of the former than the latter. Okay. So just before we launch right into here, just want to remind everyone to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, let your friends know about the awesome artwork that you're making. There's a private Facebook page. I encourage you to join it. Take a picture of your painting or anything else you've been working on. I mean, not your refinishing of your bathroom, but other paintings or drawings that you're making that you're really proud of and you want to share, or works that might need a little bit of help, and I can show you how to make them a little bit better. As well, there's some ways to support the channel for as little as $1. Everything's provided to you free, but if you want to help support the channel, here's some great ways that you can help keep the show going. And I should also say that, all the people that are reoccurring, that are usually commenting here in the chats, I would say 99% of the time are people that have also been regular contributors to the show. So I just want to share that because maybe people are wondering, I wonder who's So anyway, again, thank you to all of those of you who have been so generous over the past few years. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is transfer an image onto the canvas. Now, you could draw this, you could eyeball it and transfer onto the canvas. You may find that a little bit difficult. If you find that a little bit difficult to draw this image onto a canvas, in one of the very first episodes of the Intro to Painting series, I showed kind of various different ways to do this. If you wanted to draw it out onto a regular piece of paper, and then you could use some carbon paper to transfer that onto the canvas, that would probably be ideal rather than drawing directly onto the canvas, trying to figure it out, because if you make mistakes then you're erasing, and that can kind of make a big mess of lines on here. So another great way is you can download this free template and transfer it onto the canvas. So let me show you how to do that. In fact, before I show you how to do that, I'll show you where you can find the template. Here's the Facebook page that I mentioned. It's the first link in the description below. Now, I think the second link in the description is the Dropbox folder. And in that Dropbox folder, you're going to see, how many files do we have in here? 150 almost. At the very top of the folder is all our very basic Intro to Painting classes, as well as some of the most simple paintings that even a beginner painter, a child, can do. And so if it's a Tuesday episode, generally they're going to be in here. Today's not a Tuesday, today's a Thursday, but if you're watching this 2 years from now on a Friday morning or a Wednesday afternoon, then it doesn't matter what day they were recorded on. But we're going to scroll all the way down to 114 here, Sonia Delaunay. You're going to see these 6 files in here. And those 6 files correspond to, you have the original image, this is the outline for the one that I'm going to paint today, as well as the outline for this other Sonia Delaunay painting that I also love. So I'm going to resist the urge to try to paint 2 paintings today, because that usually makes for like a 5-6 hour long episode. So I'm just going to make this one painting today. I promise you, if I do start getting that idea in my head, you must stop me. The paint police, that is where the paint police are allowed to come get me, because I sometimes just get too excited and just get lost. So let's show you how to do the image transfer here. So I'm just gonna, I've pre-recorded this, and I'll just show you. This is a 9 by 12 inch sized canvas board that I bought online. Now I'm not going to tell you what brand it is, because I don't think they're the best. You can see it's a little uneven on the top right corner there, but there are some other ones in the video description below that I do recommend, so you can use the link to buy those if you want. You can also buy these at your art supply store. I find them more expensive at art supply stores. And you can see here's a bit of carbon paper that I'm going to put in between the outline, which I printed on my inkjet printer here at home. I just slide that in under, make sure it's the shiny side down, because the shiny side's got the graphite or carbon on it. And then I'm just going to trace it over. I think you'll just also notice I did move it down a little bit just to give a little bit more space at the very top of the head there, but otherwise that's pretty good. Now this is a relatively straightforward, fairly simple one, so it shouldn't take that long to do the transfer. You know, some of those ones that I've done in the past can take 20-30 minutes to do the transfer, just because the composition is so complicated. Okay, we pull that off, and I noticed I forgot a little detail, right? So that's why you want to just do a little double check before you peel that paper off, just to make sure there's nothing major that's missing. Oh, lots of comments in the chat there. There's Deborah and Lolly and Tanya, awesome. Gail, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so here's what we get. Here's the result. Oh, again, I'll just mention that I also did the outline for this one, but that's going to be some other time in the future. I'll work on that. And just for your consideration, this is the painting that we made on Tuesday. as part of our very basic painting series. And, you know, even if you're a more experienced painter, I think trying to paint this abstract painting by Sonia Delaunay would also be just a good exercise, right? To see if you can maybe paint it a little bit faster than maybe I did. You can certainly challenge yourself that way if you like. Okay, so I'm going to take the outline and I'm going to keep that. You could certainly put it in the recycling, but I'll keep it. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to... Where are we here? I am going to apply the Imprimatura. So, the Imprimatura is the Italian word for the first layer of paint. And it's really because the Italians were the main innovators behind this. Colleagues of Leonardo da Vinci, literally going back to that point in time. And the way that I do this is I'm going to use some warm yellow, right? So I'm going to squeeze some warm yellow out onto the palette here. About as much as I put, you know, toothpaste on my toothbrush. Maybe a little bit more. Maybe twice as much toothpaste as I put in my... Some people are like, wow, how often do you brush your teeth? Oh, that's incredible. Okay, and then I'm going to put a little bit of water on here. This is the only time I ever put water into my paint. You know, when I first started teaching these painting classes, I did use water throughout the painting process. Mostly because I just felt like maybe a lot of people don't have other mediums. And so I wanted to kind of keep it as simple as possible. And then I decided, you know, if people are going to go out and buy their own paint, they've gone to the art supply store to do that, then it's for another $20 to get some kind, like a matte medium or slow dry medium or glazing fluid, isn't really that much more of an ask, and the quality of painting goes from down here to up here instantly. Like, you can make professional quality level art with just adding that extra tool to your toolbox. Anyway, I digress. Before I paint this on here, I do want to make mention for anyone who's kind of watching, these are the paints that I'm using. Right, you can see I'm using 2 yellows, 2 reds, and 2 blues, as well as a white, and sometimes black. Probably no black in today's painting. If you don't have this brand of paint, here's a few others. I'm not going to show them for very long on the screen here. You can obviously just go pause and rewind and to these. But this is just to give you an idea if you want to reproduce pretty much exactly the palette that I'm going to use. These are the colors that I'm using here. Obviously, I talk about this a lot more in depth in the very first episode of the Intro to Painting class, so you can watch that and kind of go back and there's lots more information beyond that, including pictures of all of these materials, all of these different paints, so you can be sure you get the right ones that I'm recommending. And there's even these are a couple new ones, Holbein and the Delaunay. I always thought it was Delaunay. Is it Delaunay? I think it's Delaunay, but it might be a typo on my part. Anyway, so let's get back to actually applying this onto the canvas. Right, so I've got this all mixed up. And then I'm just going to brush this over. Now, this is probably not that much different than the way that she would have approached this painting, because as we'll see, there's a lot of yellow in the painting. I will say I almost decided to do something a little bit different today, and we'll take a look at her painting in a moment, because she is doing a few interesting things, which is not surprising. She was, you know, one of the greatest artists, human beings to ever walk the earth. So, you know, no one should be surprised that she's doing something interesting and unique, even at this, you know, stage of the painting process. But I decided to kind of keep it pretty straightforward today, just because I'm always worried about confusing some of our more beginner painters. Trying to keep things, especially at, at the beginning stage of a painting, as sort of straightforward as possible. Because, if you're new to painting, it already seems pretty overwhelming. And the less overwhelming I can make that experience for people, I think the more enjoyable it becomes. And only, I think, a very small number of people are really, really interested in in reproducing her work, like, quote unquote, exactly the way it was originally created. So, and we can talk about how it was originally created, and people can then go off and do just that. Okay, most of this is going to be covered up with paint, but it's just kind of nice to get a nice even layer on there. Great, so we'll let that dry. I guess maybe just while I was thinking, I kind of teased this idea that she might have done something a little bit different. If we look at this painting, I do think we see there's a lot of buildup of paint all over this canvas, especially like in the background here. And it suggests the possibility that she may have used another color back here. Potentially even this kind of greenish color or a blue. I'm not quite sure. But I think there was, we've put this warm yellow down. I think it's possible, like we see little hints of something that's been brushed out. So, especially on this side, there's definitely something there. So you could, if you wanted, apply like a green or a blue and then paint over top of that. I'm not going to do, in fact, as I look at it, it wouldn't surprise me if this is the color that was originally there, this green on her face. Maybe. Or maybe that's, maybe there's even, maybe is it possibly black under there? Or I don't think that's actually black. I think it's actually a black like we make a black when we mix our warm red, cool yellow, and cool blue together. Because that doesn't look like a pure black. It's definitely a mixture. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out. If there's somebody who really wants to try to recreate that, you could put a different ground down and then paint this yellow over subsequently. I think we can, if we want to do, I'm going to do a little bit of this darkening on the side, but I'm going to do that as a layer on top of this. And then maybe I will put a little bit of yellow back on top. I don't know. I'll have to think about it. Okay. So while this is drying, let's just kind of jump back to talking a little bit about who this great artist was. And on Tuesday's episode, the prior episode where we recreated one of her famous abstract paintings, Electric Prisms, we kind of went pretty in depth on where she came from. She was born 1885 and dies in 1979 at age 94. She was originally born in Odessa, Ukraine, and being partly Ukrainian myself, that is also a sign of something to be proud of. And especially since Ukraine is in the news a lot lately for really the most bad reasons possible, about being invaded again by Russia, which is one of those things that has happened to Ukraine many, many times. Is I have a neighbor who really likes to overstay their welcome, putting it lightly. Which, just as a short aside, my father's family is from Ukraine, and their village that our family comes from no longer exists. It just was wiped off the map by the Soviets around World War II. So I'm making light of something that is pretty sensitive in our family, to say the least. But I like to try to put a positive spin on things. So anyway, let's think about what do I want us to talk about that we didn't talk about last time. So the painting we're making is from 1908. So a lot of this stuff is happening after, you know, part of her biography is happening long after today's painting was made. But I do think, you know, she did a lot of sort of moving around, like, and changing locations, changing her name, marrying sort of a gay man out of convenience for various different reasons, and then before she found the love of her life, Robert Delaunay. And I do think that her being a bit of a kind of pretty cosmopolitan person certainly played a role in the kind of work that she made. Her fearlessness with color, and not just making colorful paintings, but also bringing those bright colors into the world of fashion, textiles, furniture, as I said, interior design, set design, costumes, I think, you know, shows her confidence as a person, her, especially as a woman. Again, you know, she's doing most of the groundbreaking things she did when she was, you know, like, how old would she have been? You know, 1880. Let's go back to the top. 1885. So she's like 23 when she made today's painting, and she's about 25 when she starts going into abstraction, and she's about 30 years old when she starts her own clothing line. You know, like, that's pretty remarkable. And I've never read anything about her that you know, makes any kind of association with her as like a proto-feminist, or being active in like women's liberation and the helping women get the right to vote. But I do think in her own way she lived as a liberated person, right? There's no one has the confidence to walk down the street with, you know, super bright colors without having some sense of with a great deal of confidence and fearlessness. I mean, if you've ever been to Paris, especially in the winter, you know, everyone's dressed in, just like here in Vancouver, in grays and blacks and browns and navy blues. She would have been the opposite. If she was living today, she would still stick out like a sore thumb. I don't know. I just find that I'm just so. There's a part of me that is like, she's a hero to me personally, and I think she should be for a lot of other people. I just want to take a quick look again at her work. Let's just kind of go back up to the top. So again, you can see this is another painting by her of that same era. They don't really have any of her real early work. I returned all the library books I had. I had a stack of hers for a while here. But, you know, I will say that one of the reasons, so today's painting and the previous one as well, you know, I think this is, they may be based on the same person, and I'm trying to remember the story behind these paintings. In fact, yeah, I don't think it's going to tell us. You know, so what's interesting, you know, they're tying her work to the Fauvist painters, post-impressionist painters, expressionist painters. We talked a little bit about last time her interest in Van Gogh and Gauguin, who are really the two most famous post-impressionist artists, and then Fauvism, which is a movement most closely associated with Henri Matisse, and we're going to be doing, is it next week? 5 Matisse paintings. So we have a whole week of Matisse coming up. Fauvism, I guess, has begun by this time, but I really think she's coming up with her own ideas of art simultaneous to the like legendary master Matisse, which I think is, you know, reason for her to be much more well known than she really has been. And then of course you could see like the influence of Gauguin, who is and his Tahitian art. Gauguin would have died right around this time, and was such a famous. They had a parade, like to mourn his death after he died in Paris, because he at that point had become this like titan of art, and it would have been really hard to have ignored his art if you were living in Paris at the time when she made this painting. Okay, so let's get right into it here, because I want to get to this, and I want to try to do it in as relatively quickly as possible. Okay, so with this, so often what we do, especially when we're painting a portrait, is sometimes go in and do a little bit of painting over top of some of the lines that we have in our painting in order to help us to see the details that may get covered up later on with subsequent layers of paint. So let's just take a look at this and see if that's something we're going to need to do today. I don't know. I think I think we can do this without doing any dark outlines on here to help preserve this face, because she's using such contrasting colors that are quote unnaturalistic. Naturalism being trying to paint someone quote unquote as they are, and some artists would say, well, what does that really mean? What does that mean to paint things truthfully, right? Because some people might see things differently than others, right? And again, what I think is so magical about her is the way that she expresses herself with these bright colors. So I think I'm going to skip the underpainting for today's episode and go right down to our background layer and kind of work in that area, because generally what we want to do is establish the background, go to the foreground, finish the back. We want to start with the background, or get a layer or a pass of the background, and then come back, do the foreground, and get that established, then go back to the background, finish it off, and then finish the foreground. This looks like it's still a little bit wet. Okay, so where's my hair dryer? I'm gonna use my hair dryer to dry this down here really quickly, so give me one. Oh, so many comments in here. Lots of very positive comments. I really appreciate all of the support here. Well, he says, I'm always ready to paint, hesitantly, tentatively, anxiously ready. And Pascal says, me too, I'm almost ready. Better days now. Painting helps tons. Well, he says, it's the painting in these streams that keep me sane. Relaxing, fun stuff, no stress. I need more of it all day, every day. That's awesome. You know, just as a quick aside, just thinking about that, like I've been reading, our daughter was diagnosed with autism last week, and so I've just been doing a bunch of research on how to support her, and just this idea of like trying to learn how to better regulate our emotions and deal with stresses in our environment, which is a big thing for someone with autism. And just thinking about, you know, she's already very interested in drawing, which makes me, I find really exciting, and just how it seems to be like a self-soothing exercise for her. Like she literally calms down when she's drawing, and I think that works for almost everyone, right? That's why there's that industry. The art therapy is this new industry out there, because it's such a calming, relaxing way to approach things. Now, when you're beginning, it's a little bit harder because you're still learning, but once you get a few of these lessons down, it becomes a lot more relaxing, right? Ace Paula says, I'm usually feeling very chill in the evening. This class makes me feel warm. That's great. Pascal says, it helps to follow a pro guide and teacher. I appreciate that. Pascal says she has paintings like Mondrian towards the bottom of that page. I guess a little, like, definitely the abstraction in that same sort of approach. I think when we're looking at those images of hers here, I think most of these are, like, they're paintings on paper, but that were used mostly for creating fabric, that were used for fashion. I guess these are a few paintings. So she did, but a lot of these are on paper. I think at a certain point she was doing less and less painting and more of these kind of fashion illustrations, and doing large murals, also sometimes in collaboration with her husband. But yes, definitely there's and a lot of that would have been done before Mondrian too, right? So again, she is like a trailblazer for sure. Tanya says these classes work wonders. I appreciate that, Tanya. And Lolly says the difference here is there's none of that pretentious stuff you sometimes find with other professionals. That's partly why I love it here. Yes, awesome. You guys are so sweet. And a lot of people really excited about Matisse coming up. That's great. That makes me super excited, because Matisse is one of my favorites. I mean, obviously I've got 189 other favorites, but Matisse would be in my top 10 for sure. So it's been a long time that I've been waiting to get there. Okay, Michael, stop talking, start painting. Okay, so let's take a look here and think about how we're gonna do our background. I mean, the color that we've got to start out with, we've got this just solid warm yellow to begin with. It's not too far off everything. Like, I think that same color that we've got in the background is probably right here. But you could see that there's a bit more of a warmer orangey color here. As I mentioned before, we've got some kind of greenish qualities in here, kind of a grayish green here. We've got some kind of bluish thing here. So let's put some paint on the palette, and then we'll start painting this. I think probably the first things I'll do is maybe paint a bit of an orange, and I'm going to use a little bit of warm yellow too, because she's got a bit of warm yellow in that background. So basically I'm going to use all of the colors in my palette, more of some than others, certainly. Clean these lids are all gummed up inside, so that's something I'll have to do for next episode. And my warm blue, and we're rocking and rolling. And we're probably going to use a good little bit of white, even in, you might not expect in such a painting, but there's areas that are going to demand a little bit of white. I mean, specifically down here in the clothing, but even there's little bits of white mixed in elsewhere as well. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to take a larger brush. I'm going to take some of my warm yellow, and I'm going to take, let's mix this right here. Take just a little bit of red. I don't want to go too nuts with it. In fact, let's just stay there for a moment. Just move some of these paints out of the way. Okay. And then I'm just going to sort of just gently brush this in. Almost kind of dry brush it a bit. Right, you don't really need to go too much darker than that. You saw that I just put barely any yellow, or sorry, red in there. I was going to take a little bit more of my warm yellow, and you can see, and I haven't cleaned my brush. I'm just going to kind of brush this out. This is my warm yellow without anything additional mixed in, and so I mean, on camera, I'm not even sure if you could tell the difference. I can see a slight bit more orange here. It's just giving it kind of a nice rich layer. Now let's take, again, without even washing my brush, I'm going to take some of this yellow, cool yellow, and I'm just going to play with this and kind of mix it a little bit just right onto the canvas in here. And because the paint is wet, it's going to blend fairly nicely. If the paint is already kind of dried a little bit, you might notice it kind of scrubs some of the paint off. Take more, big clump of that. It's much easier to do this when you have lots of paint on your brush. So this is also just sort of filling in the texture of the canvas a little bit. And then I'm going to take a little bit of white, not too much, and just mix this in. Maybe just a little tiny bit more. I mean, there was, maybe a chickpea, well, not less than a chickpea size of paint there. And then let's put a bit of this here. Now this paint is still pretty wet, so I'm not really going to get awesome results, but in fact, I might just let that dry. Maybe I'll blow dry it just to kind of speed this process up. You know what? I keeped a lot of paint on there, right? You saw me scooping and spreading all that paint. So even though I'm blow drying it, it's still pretty wet, and it's not drying it maybe as fast as I would like it to. So I'm just gonna let that sit, and let's just go to a different part of the painting while that's happening, and we can always come back to the to that part of the painting later on. So let's go instead work on the foreground. Right, we've just done our first pass on the background, so let's do our first pass on the foreground. Okay, so if we look at the original again, what is it that we should be doing on this face to get closer to this? Now that is a good question, because there's a, you know, we could do this painting really, really fast. We can do this really, really slow and get super accurate. So the really, really fast way would be a way just to kind of, if I was doing this with kindergarten kids, grade 2, 3 kids, we could do this painting really, really fast. I certainly wouldn't have done even these first few steps here. We'd probably begin on white paper, and we would just paint this, you know, in half an hour we'd be done. And also, if we were to try to recreate exactly, it could take us maybe a couple of days, because I think there's that level of complexity here. So obviously I want to try to find something a little bit closer to the middle, if anything even closer to that kindergarten approach here. Okay, well, the first thing I would say is, you know, I was just using, I still have it on my paintbrush, some of this cool yellow and white. There was a little bit of warm red in there, but that's, you know, there was warm yellow. It was mostly cool yellow with a little bit of warm yellow and white, but that works really great for the background, right? We want warmer colors in the foreground, so we're really gonna try as much as possible to bring out the warmer yellows. Now, I will say, as I'm saying that, you know, this pink down here, that's interesting. Actually, as I look at it, yeah, there's some purple under here. You know, I bet you what she's doing, I mean, I imagine that she did not expect the painting to turn out like this when she began. That she's painted over things. Like this blue under here, that might have been the original color of the shirt, and then she decided, you know what? I'm gonna go wild with this pink. So there is a part of me that really does think about painting a lot of this blue, but then we would lose certain details here. So I'm just going to try to keep it simple. So I think, you know, what I want to do is I'm going to start painting some of the facial features to help get those in place. It's a little bit like an underpainting process. So I'm going to take my warm blue. I'm going to do a little bit of painting with my warm blue. Now in retrospect, I could have done this before my background, but you know, sometimes it takes a second to think of like the proper approach you want to use for a painting. So I think I am going to do a little bit of outlining with this. So let's take a look at these side by side. Because we see this color kind of poking through in a few places. So going to just throw it in here. And this ultramarine blue, my warm blue, works pretty good for this type of thing because going over top of the yellow, it's going to naturally get very dark. Potentially even too dark. So when we get to a few places, I'm going to lighten it up a little bit. In fact, maybe I'm going to just do that right now. I'm going to take some white. That's a lot, so I'm just going to, I don't want to go quite so light. So I'm going to mix that in here. The other thing too with using a little bit of this white is it's going to make subsequent layers of color, even if they're not blue, they're going to go very nicely over top of this color. They're going to play much nicer than they will with over top of this dark color. So maybe I'm just going to continue that down there. Let's see. Now this is actually a cool blue that she paints in this area. It's actually kind of a cool green in there, now that I see it. But I'm going to put this little bit of a warmer blue underneath. And I'm not worried about making it like a big solid block of paint either. Because there's going to be other color that's going to go over top of this. I'm going to allow a little bit of that darker blue to kind of come back. Take a little bit more of this lighter white, and I'm going to paint this right along the strip where it's going to be a bit more, we're going to have this bright green here, but even just putting that blue there I think is going to, because one of the things, a lot of these colors are cooler, like this is a cooler green, and by us putting this warmer blue underneath it, is coupled with this warm yellow there, it's going to help keep this cool blue and cool green from wanting to push backwards in space. Because again, warm colors want to advance towards us. Cool colors want to go into the background. So if we're going to use cool colors on a face, we want to think about how we can control its tendency to want to go backwards. Because if in this face are some of the closest things to us, right? So we want to make sure they even though they're cool, that they come forward and don't naturally recede. Let me see. I think so. I'm just looking at this painting. I think I'm okay with that for right now. If anything, I'm just painting her eyes, which are going to be a darker ultramarine blue later on. I mean, they're almost a little bit more cobalt, which is kind of right in between, but I think for our purpose we'll just use that. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with that so far. So let's maybe zoom out for a second. Oops. And down here, I'm going to take a bit of this could be, I don't know, we'll see. I'm going to take a bit of this white and blue, and I'm going to paint underneath her pink shirt down here. I'm going to do this because I see there's something under there like this. And so I want to just see if I can get that same something that she's got going on in her painting. Anybody else? Anybody else need a bit of blue? I think that's probably good enough, right? Okay. So, what should we do? Let's do some warm yellow on her face. Forgot this brush is sitting here, gonna dry all up, so let's get that out of the way. Let's go to a mid-sized brush. I wonder if I can use... It's still very watery. I'd like to use... that's the color I want to use, but there's still maybe too much water in that. So let's take our warm yellow and our warm red again, kind of like what we did here. And I'm making this a little bit more orange than I painted here. And then I'm going to paint this. On her, a lot of the places on her face right away here. Right across here. Okay. I think I'm happy with that. So, you know, maybe actually I'll just go back here so we could see, you know, even though I had this little bit of a warmer orange here, by putting this even, like, orange is the color that's going to advance most intensely. That and red, but even orange is even more warmer, right? It's because we've got two really warm colors, so it's going to pull forward. It's going to pull even further forward than this one, which is a little bit more diluted, right? Just more yellowy orange as opposed to orange itself. Now that I've got this on here, I want to muddy it up a little bit. In fact, I'm just gonna I'm gonna go to a smaller brush. I'm gonna do a little bit of this while the paint is still kind of wet, because this is a different painting process than I think we've used recently, where we're doing a little bit more wet on wet painting. And wet on wet is a approach to painting that is exactly the way it sounds. You're painting wet paint over top of other wet paint. Now, primarily artists that were using this technique were painting with oil paints, not acrylic. Acrylic didn't even exist until the very end of Sonia Delaunay's life. So it doesn't quite capture the same kind of effect, but we can, if the paint is still a little bit wet, we can kind of still brush into the wet paint. There's just a little bit of white in here, not too much. So one thing that white does, I think people often think of, if I put white in something, it's going to make it brighter. White tints color and makes it lighter. It doesn't make it brighter. The difference between bright and light is quite significant. Lighter is when a color gets approaching white, whereas brighter often means more saturated, right? And the only way to get a more saturated color is by using the color right out of the tube, right? So there's going to be a few places where I'm going to come back over this with a little bit of the yellow out of the tube. Now I'm going to take a little bit of my warm blue and mix this into this. Now I've got this kind of, it looks kind of like a muddy greenish, not like the most flattering color of all time, but this is the color that I see kind of underneath her neck here. I see some of it on her forehead. Okay, I'm going to take a bit more blue and my warm yellow. So I've got this kind of grassy greenish color. Now we don't have a lot of it. This is a different color that's in here. I'm just going to put this here anyway. I'm going to, again, just to help keep these features forward. Just to kind of get rid of some of the blue that was on here. Now I can kind of go not sure. Is that, can you see those brush strokes? It looks like it's getting kind of dark. Okay, and then I'm just going to take this same color but introduce more warm red into it, which makes it go more brownish. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this yellow that I had at the very beginning. So by adding some red back into that green, we get a bit more of a brownish color, right? So what I would encourage you to do is feel quite free about applying color all over the place. I think one of the features of a painting like this is just the building up of paint. Whether it's in the exact right color at this moment or not is kind of irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. Because we want to just have lots of little bits of paint kind of showing through in various different levels here. So, Pascal says the original's cracked a little. Yes, that's true. Which is often a sign that there might have been a lot of like many layers. Usually it means, technically what that means is that the layer on top dried before the layer below, right? So what's an example? It's like if you've ever left like 2% milk out in a cup overnight, and then you in the morning there might be that kind of little skin on top and it's kind of wrinkled a little bit because the top layer started to dry and it formed that layer, but the bottom underneath is still wet, so there's water or moisture trying to escape through that dried layer. So in painting it's kind of similar in that instead of wrinkling, it cracks because the top layer has formed a solid layer. Underneath it might be kind of dry to the touch, but it's not fully cured. And as it dries, it sort of starts pulling the paint in different directions, causing that kind of crack. Now, there's all sorts of reasons why that might happen. I think probably in a painting like this, it's because she probably put a lot of layers of paint on here, right? Kind of like what we're doing, just sort of building up the surface here. And so I'm actually, so it tells us the fact that it's mostly cracked around this side of the painting makes me think that this area right here was a number of different colors before she settled on this yellow. So what I think is probably likely is that this yellow here was would have been one of the very final things that she painted after having done everything else, and was like, something's wrong here. Maybe this was a dark blue and she had dark blue or purple under here, and just kept painting. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to paint this pink, and I'm going to paint the background yellow, and boom, boom, boom. Right? Okay, so let's paint the... You know what? I think let's I think my background is nice and dry. So, oh, I'll wait for that to boot up again. Sometimes it crashes. A good idea to take a sip of tea. There we go. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the background. We're going to finish the background, and then we're going to finish the foreground, because I think we've got the foreground and background, our first layers of paint, I'm really happy with. If we were painting with oil paint, it would probably be a lot more back and forth than what we're typically doing with acrylic painting. So let's put this cooler yellow. I think I'm going to apply with some white here, and we want to do some kind of blue. It's just sort of a bit of a muddier color, so let me think about that. How could we do this? Again, this is not what she would have done, because it's not like... I don't think she knew when she started painting that the background would be yellow. So, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some cool blue, and I'm going to take my matte medium, and actually I'm just going to wipe off some of that excess, because I don't want it to be too dark. I just want this. That's probably good enough. Very thin coat of this. And then there's this area, it's a little bit more intense. So I'm just putting that blue in its maybe more intense state right there. Maybe same sort of thing too. Okay. So I'm going to blow dry this, and then I'm going to put some yellow over top of that. And you know what? Before I even go too much further, I'm going to also... Remember I made this brown here? Since I still got a bit of it, I'm going to take that. I'm just going to put some more intense, kind of just some brown. There. Okay, mute this. I appreciate, Lolly, you say, don't forget to thumbs up the stream, everyone. I appreciate that. Terry is not awesome says, hey, I have an unrelevant question. Are you a pilot? No, I'm not a pilot, but I have I had a chance to fly faster than the speed of sound in a fighter jet plane. If you've seen my website, perhaps you've seen some clips of me in the back of a CF-18 Hornet fighter plane making drawings. I'd like to, one day, maybe I'll get a pilot's license or something. My wife probably would be too happy about that. I think she thinks I get in enough trouble on the ground as it is, but I appreciate the question. I'm curious what made you think of that, Terry. Okay. So now I'm going to take my cool yellow. I've built up, I think, I had this warm, we had a warm yellow Imprimatura, right? And then I built up some more warm yellow and a little bit of cool yellow. And then I decided I could have done this very thin with just a little bit of like a glaze. And I thought, you know what, let's see if we can bury this a little bit, not completely, with some cool yellow that'll push the whole background backwards even further. And again, I don't think this is probably what she would have done, but doesn't mean we can't do it, and we can get, I think we'll get very close to her results. Now, if let's actually, I was just going to say, what happens if we put this right on top of things? It does a pretty good job of covering. It's going to go very orangey. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a fairly good helping of white and this color. And then I'm going to add a little bit of matte medium, which is going to make it a little bit more transparent. The thing with that white is that it's going to help keep, it's, even though it's going to be more transparent, it's still going to kind of block a lot of it out pretty well. So instead, let's, in fact, is I think that's okay. I don't want to go, you know, if we look at these, so my goal is just, I'm going to do a few layers of this kind of, these thin, semi-transparent layers. What it is going to do is just give it that look that there was something else underneath here. That this painting might be a little bit more complex than it might first appear. Okay, so actually I'm going to blow dry this, and then we'll do this again. Okay, so let's just see how much more we want to build up on here. I think definitely up there. And I'm probably going to be using much less and less white as I go here. There's definitely more white right up in here. And just more yellow. This canvas, for whatever reason today, is just sliding all over the place. Maybe even before things are totally dry, I'm just going to take some of this warm yellow, mix a bit of it into my cool yellow. That's pretty good. Let's blow dry this. It's not totally dry, but that's okay. I'm going to mix this brown again. Warm yellow, warm red, warm blue. Now that's going to be too dark, but in fact, maybe I'll use a little bit of the color I mixed for the background, even though it's still got some water in it. That water's slowly starting to evaporate. And it's kind of like using matte medium, I guess. Let's get a little bit more cool yellow now. there's nothing particularly super. If you're kind of watching this, you're like, oh, this is getting. There's a lot of different stuff going on here. Mostly, like, I'm just kind of playing around with the paint and allowing myself the freedom just to kind of use a bunch of different colors to try to create this kind of slightly, you know, this effect that there's a lot of paint kind of building up all over the place. Okay, so I'll let this dry, and then I'm gonna put a little bit more just cool yellow. See, I kind of went a little bit too far now that I looked here. That I could, in fact, you know, if I do feel it's a little bit too far, then let's take a rag. Let's see if I can scrub some of this back. So I pulled that a little bit too far. So this is just a dry rag. If I used a white or a wet one, I might get a little bit, I might wipe off too much. Just being a little bit cautious there. Here, again, I went a little bit too far, so it's not too hard just to put a bit of paint back. Now, I do feel like that's a bit of a warmer blue that she used. Mine's a bit of a cooler blue. That doesn't bother me too much, but if again you wanted to get closer to the original, let's see this side. Maybe let's just see if I dip my finger in here, if we can just scrub a bit of paint off. And then how about right here? I don't know. I think that's probably good enough. Splitting hairs here. But it does show that there's fun things you can do with, like, mostly this, like, that wiping away is much more of an oil painting technique. But you can see that, acrylic paint, even though it dries pretty quickly, it doesn't fully cure for about 24 hours. So you could still get away with wiping some paint off, even after the paint has been on there for a little while. I mean, it's much easier if it's within like 5-10 minutes, but that's kind of cool. I like that effect. And again, if you go a little bit too far, you scrub too much, then you just put a little bit of paint back there and problem solved, right? Okay. So, I would say that background, I think I'm pretty satisfied. Excuse me. There's some kind of bubble in my throat there. So, now let's go back to the foreground and really, we'll spend maybe another 30 minutes here on the foreground, and then we'll be done, right? So, because we've got everything kind of in place. It might not feel like that when we look at these two side by side. If we look at these side by side, you're probably like, wow, they're way off. But everything we see here is in the painting, right? It's just, this is the foundational layers there that are about to be kind of somewhat covered. So, Tanya says, I wonder if Sonia did the same. It looks like it. Yeah, as I said, I do think, it's certainly not uncommon for artists to recycle paintings. So there's two possibilities that happened here. One of which that she painted over an existing painting. Like maybe if we X-rayed it, there would be a person riding a horse or a tree there, and she was just like, I've had that one in my studio, no one's bought it for a year or two, I'm getting kind of hungry, why don't we just turn it and paint a portrait on there? My portrait's been selling well, so let's make some more portraits or something, right? I mean, as sort of unglamorous and unromantic as that might sound, that sometimes it comes down to artists, have to make something to sell to keep themselves afloat, right? So it's either she painted over an existing thing, or that she worked on the background and was just not feeling that color and decided to do something over top of it, which again should be a invitation to anyone else that if a painting is just, you're like, I don't know, like, it's just something wrong with this painting, you could do like Sonia Delaunay, just throw the yellow over top of it, put that bold pink right on here, and boom, take it somewhere out new. Lolly wants the pink. Let's take a look at the original. I do want to go, where's my, I do want that pink here, but I'm thinking that pink, well, I was going to say, I thought that pink would have been one of the last layers. What's going on here? I think before I get to the pink, because that looks like this was painted over top a bit of that pink. There's a bit of red. I think what I wanted... Sometimes this mouse gets confused with paint on my fingers. You know what I think I want to do is I'm going to come back to my blue. That's what I want to do first, my ultramarine blue, and kind of finish off a few things. So let's put these side by side and zoom in here. So I'm going to take my ultramarine blue right out of the tube. And I may even go use my ultramarine blue again later on there. I'm going to put this ultramarine blue here by her neck. And even I think... So I don't know if you can see the difference between, you know, my dark color, I mean, I guess I've painted a lot of yellow over top of everything, but it was really dark, whereas look, with a little bit of white underneath this blue, it really just glows. And again, I'm going to put just a tiny bit of white. Oops, that was too much. And come back into here because some of this got covered up. Okay. And then I think I'm going to take my warm red and mix it with my cool blue to get a really dark, kind of coagulated blood crimson color. Right? So we're going across the color wheel. Right, we've taken our I've just taken my warm red and cool blue, mixed them together, and what I'm trying to do is get something that is, it's kind of like, almost like a magenta, but it's a bit warmer, right? And again, I am going to use a bit of magenta when I do my pink, but see, this color is just got it's just I don't know how to describe it. It's just, there's something, it's still got our warm red in it, but it's kind of nice and dark. So let's do a little bit more. Here we go. So I'm going to take this color that I just mixed. A bit more of it up in here. Anywhere, oops, there's maybe a bit in here like that. And then over top of, kind of like her top eyelids here. Oh, and I see she's also done, in fact, I need to go to a smaller brush here. The top lip. And this nostril also have that color. Okay. I think that's okay. Now, I don't think... I might even, when this is dry, put a little bit of the cold red magenta over top of these. Just give it a little bit of a pop. If... So this is the way, like, this is the way that I'm, with this palette, this very limited palette, I can simulate any color. You may not necessarily be able to do it all at once, literally mix that color on your brush. I suspect she's, you know, that's probably a color that's coming maybe right out of a tube. So it's, I have to kind of be a little bit creative on how I replicate that. Let's take warm red. Let's see if I take this warm red right out of the tube now. And paint. It looks like it kind of sweeps in here, and I didn't quite get that. So I'll do that separately. I'll trim this down with another color later on here. So now I got this warm red. Let's take a bit of the warm yellow and a tiny bit of white to get this peachy color. Because she then uses this, it's almost a bit too much white. So let me see if I can just reduce the amount of white in here by just introducing a bit more yellow. Bit more white. Okay. Even more white. Oops, that's maybe too much. I'm just going to use a little bit more of my Imprimatura. Okay, what should we do next? Maybe should we do the pink here? Okay, so the pink. And let's maybe go to, let's see, this medium-sized brush here. I'm going to take my cool red, and maybe even before I do anything with this cool red, I want to paint a few things with it. Including just a few folds that are in her clothes. I'm going to take this cool red, bring a bit of that in there, just complicate that a little bit. Oh, and I also want to take, you know what, let's do one thing at a time, Michael. I was going to do her lips, but I think I'll come back. So let's take our cool red, magenta, and white. That's pretty good. Oops, there's a little, somebody joined in the party here. I'm going to take also a bit of warm red, because that was it's almost too candy colored. So let's see if we just strike a bit of a balance. Okay, so my goal is not to obliterate all the blue here. I kind of want to keep little bits of that so that just a little hint to somebody looking at it that there's maybe a little bit more than to this painting than the eye might see at first. Alright, so I can even take my rag again and just maybe wipe a bit away. Okay. Let's take this same color. Maybe I should go to a smaller brush here. So I'm taking this is my cool red. I put a little bit of warm red in here, but now mostly cool red. And you can see these very distinct brush strokes. She didn't try to smooth this out. I'm also going to take the same color, paint it on the lips. Not done with those lips. There's still work to be done there, but that's part of the layer here. Okay. I'm going to take just a little bit more white. Right, it's not, you can see, this is the previous layer, this is this layer, just a little bit lighter. Right, in fact, I might have gone a little bit too much, but just again going back in here, taking a bit more white. And if I feel it's a little bit too intense, I just mix a bit more paint back in. Back the other way, a little bit lighter. Okay, we'll leave that for now. Let's just, I got some paint brushes, I just need a little, actually, let me see, yeah, I think I can clean these two. Well, Lolly says, I'm loving this painting more and more with every brushstroke, beautiful and vibrant. We will see in just a few days, we're going to be doing a couple of Matisse paintings that also have a lot of color. He's sort of famously like the artist of color, in opposition to Picasso, who's the artist of the line. Matisse, bold colors, but you can't get too much bolder than what she did here at about the exact same time, right? And the fact that she only that Sonia Delaunay created these paintings and then just moved on, right? She's just like, yeah, I did that. Did a couple paintings that were masterpieces. I could have done my whole career like this, but decided I got other things I'm also interested in. It's just like, that's sort of like, for me, a sign of a total master that is just, you know, like, I don't know, it would be, it's like the Beatles or the Bob Dylan changing mid-career, just being like, you know what, I'm just gonna dive feet first in this. If people don't like it, then too bad, because I got one life, I'm gonna live it, and this is what I'm gonna do with it. Okay, I do want to just add a little bit more nuance into her clothing down here. So let's get, I'm gonna get maybe a bit more, just like we were doing with the face. So I'm gonna do a few areas that are a little bit darker magenta, and a few maybe that have a little bit more white in them. I think I can just go zoom out here. And you know, I see a tiny bit, there's a bit of yellow in this magenta that's giving it a little bit of a slightly peachy quality. Right in, oop, that's a little much, but that's okay. This is much lighter over here. Taking the same kind of peachy color, bring it back into the face. Okay, what should we do next? I guess we're getting closer and closer to the end. Now I think what I want to do now is actually this pretty dark color, which is basically like this. I should clean my brush. I do like when the brush gets dirty. The only thing is, if it gets dirty and there's white in there, then it will, I think, usually negatively impact that color, because it'll lose its intensity, right? So this was my warm red and cool blue. Let's take a bit of my cool yellow and turn this more into a gray. That's pretty good, pretty close enough, I think, for me. And then Now, as I paint this, it does look like maybe at one point this was underneath this red, and I maybe could have done this earlier and made this red a little bit more subdued. But I can remember that color basically this is that same color we mixed earlier. I can just take this just to darken it a bit. I could go even further, obviously, but I'm kind of happy with the way it looks right now. Any more of my darkest color? I'm gonna go back to make another brown. I don't know how I missed this. We got this brown here. Where's my warm blue? So interesting. What we're seeing in this area, I think, is let's just, in fact, let's zoom in. Oh, maybe not. Now that we look in closer, maybe I'm not so far off. I thought this might be kind of like what I have here, a darker color that she's painting over, but it's not too far off this brown. Maybe that's a little bit still too dark. So let's just get a bit more warm yellow. I just want a brown, but just a little bit of a lighter brown. And I'm going to go to a smaller brush. Same thing up here. I think that we can get darker, but before we get darker, let's just how about underneath her neck in here? Need to, that's a bit of a kind of a grayish color. So I'm going to take my dark color that I just mixed a few moments ago. Let's put this in the middle and then just put a bit of white into it. That looks not bad. Let's just see. And then I'm going to take a little bit of warm blue and a little bit of yellow. Basically, I kind of want to make a bit of a greenish quality out of this. Take a bit of just some yellows and blues. Doesn't really matter, I think, too much. It's so diluted, but let's try this again. Let's make this to the side. There we go. Got a proper green. There we go. Okay, I think that's good. Let me come back up here. I think I'll need to, let's do that separately. I don't have enough paint on my palette for that. Okay. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to paint these greens that are in the face. And then we'll be kind of into finishing touches area here. So that green, let's take our cool yellow and cool blue together. Get this really nice, bright, intense color. But it's right now, we don't really have that green anywhere in the painting. So we want to add a bit of white to it. Now that color's still not quite there. I think we just need more cool blue. Getting closer. When I'm sort of looking at these greens in here. I think that's pretty close. It could be a little bit more white. So let's see. I need to go to just a slightly smaller brush, which was dirty, and I just mixed into my color I just made. So I'll just use the paint right on this brush. Those are bold colors. Wow. Like this. You know, like, there's very few people who would have the courage to make a painting like this. That's incredible. I mean, that just blows me away. That is pretty cool. Okay, that's pretty close. Let's do the blue inside. So basically, I think it's the same sort of thing, but let's mix it. Just gonna mix it off. Actually, you know what? There's that really dark color there. Dark green. So a lot of cool blue in here. I think we need a little bit of warm red in here. It's going to kill the warmth of that, or the coolness of this blue. And I see it kind of curving all the way up in here too. And in these eyebrows. I guess that was a bit more of a brown eyebrow there. That's okay though. So let's put a bit of this. Okay, everything, am I happy with that so far? I think so. Going to take that same color . Okay. So let's do the tip of her nose. So I think this is mostly going to be, I'm just going to put some white up here. Let's take this color we're just painting with. That color's okay. It's a little too minty, so I just want to take some of my darker color and just make it a little bit more of a slight grayish quality to it. Mine's a little bit bright. I could have been a much darker gray. Or not much, but just toned down just a little bit. So I think I can fix that. That's no problem. I'm just going to keep going with it though. In fact, I'm going to put it It's definitely too much, but what if I just now that I got that there, let's get a different rag. That one's done. And just kind of wipe a bit of that away. I'm going to keep that on the nose and just darken that. Just wanted to see what that would look like. You never know until you do it, right? If it's going to be a good idea or a bad idea. Let's do the cool blue around her eyes now. So let's take this cool blue, a little bit of white, see, I have to use my fingers too to do a bit of smudging around with paint, and I enjoy doing that, but so I'm going to take this same dark color again that I used for, where did I use this? I think for up here. I'm going to use this to shape her eyelid a bit. And the same thing in between her lips here. Yeah, actually I'm going to get just a little bit of warm blue into this mixture. Just turning the outside edge just a little bit up. It's going to give her just a bit more of a happier face. All right. Okay. Now, getting pretty close. So we're going to now move into kind of the last phase of painting, just doing little touch-ups here and there, and then we should be done here very shortly, in about 10 minutes. So that's a good idea, just to clean a few brushes off. So really, what we're lacking right now, I guess we could, there's maybe some browns, basically, that we can apply in a number of places, almost as like little glazes that we can use to darken a few areas. Kind of just want to go back to this ear with warm red, and something that was on my list of things to do. And this little area here, just putting more warm red there. Maybe a little bit more of this warm red up here. Okay. Magenta. I think I'm going to just take a bit of magenta and some white. Just clean up the collar a little bit. You know, so again, some of this might be depending on how your painting turned out. Like, you might not need to do this at all, right? You might have found it turned out pretty good in those areas, so congrats. Me, I needed to do a little touch up here and there. Now that blue should be darker, but when I look at mine, do I mind it so much? I don't know. I don't mind it. We can do that with some glaze. I mean, honestly, I gotta say, like, I kind of like the painting like this. I don't mind that some areas are a little bit brighter than the original. But I'm gonna spend 5 more minutes just putting a little bit of a brown glaze on a few things just to get it 10% closer to the original, and then I'll be done. Because I like really bright paintings. That's just my own personal style. So it tends to be like everything that we do tends to just be a little bit more saturated color-wise than maybe it actually should be, but I can't help myself, and so far I've managed to evade the paint police, so maybe I'm just pushing my luck. Okay, so here's a brown. In fact, I'm just going to wipe a bit of it off, and then I'm going to go into the glazing fluid. Maybe I should just mention again, so this is my satin glazing fluid. There's gloss glazing fluid and there's satin glazing fluid. I prefer the satin glazing fluid. Okay. So I can use this to kind of darken a few areas. It's very subtle. So if it's too subtle, then we can just add a little bit more. Maybe I'll take just a bit more of this blue. Put that in there. And up there, I'm going to take a lot more. I think I'll have to wait for that to dry because that's... Well, let's just take this and go over top of this blue. And here, was that... Not the intended effect that I wanted. I don't know. I kind of... Oh, let's do this here on the nose. That's one of the main reasons I was doing this. I forgot. So it just muddies that color up a little bit. In fact, We'll just let that dry. I'll blow dry it, and then we'll do it again. Okay, so sorry, there was some technical difficulty there. I think things are working again. Now I'm gonna mute it. Okay. So let's do... It's almost a bit too much there this time, hey? That's good. Let's do underneath the eyes. This was a bit darker though. And this one was significantly darker. What else? Let's go back up into this hair here. What if I take a bit more of this yellow? Bit of blue to make a bit of a green. Ah. Oh, got a little bit of red there, but I don't mind that red there. Kind of feel like I'm just rearranging furniture, right? You know, like, I don't know if anything is really happening at this point. So usually that's a sign that the painting is done. Okay. So, I'm just going to blow dry one more time. Okay. So. And so, before we do our side-by-side comparison here, I just want to remind everyone, if you enjoyed today's episode, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, take a picture of the painting you just made, upload it to the Facebook group so that once a month we can go through, we can look at it, celebrate your achievements. If you painted today's painting, I'm super proud of you. I would love to see how it turned out. I bet you it's awesome. If you want to support the channel, there's a couple different ways you could do that, with a small donation as little as $1, as much as you'd like. There's a PayPal link down below, super chat function. You send an e-transfer or a good old-fashioned check in the mail by contacting me directly. Okay, so let's take a look at them side by side. Where are we here? Oops, I want that. Oh, I was thinking about doing a little more glazing here, but I think I'm done. I think that's good enough for government work. Alright, again, mine is maybe a little bit brighter, some of those blues in there, and I could have maybe even darkened this blue there. But I feel pretty happy with the way it all turned out. Alright, if we just sort of zoom in. there somewhere. Cool. One more time. Let's zoom back out. Cool. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for painting along with me. I would love to see what you've done. In a few weeks, we'll take a look at all of the artwork that's on the Facebook group. So, time to get your paintings done, get them up on the website. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening. Join me next week when we'll take a look at a completely different artist. Another one of my very favorite artists. Until then, everyone, enjoy the rest of your night. And we'll talk to you again very, very soon.